On this episode of Rowdy Riley's Sports Review, you'll hear from Dawson Knox. Dawson is a tight end for the Bills. He had an interesting transition to collegiate football. He actually also got drafted in his hometown.
Welcome to the Rowdy Riley Sports Review. My name is Rowdy Riley. Let's get rowdy!
Dawson, thanks so much for coming on, man.
Absolutely. It's good to be here.
I first want to start off by asking about your faith. What has been the driving factor?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I've grown up a Christian my whole life. I actually grew up going to church at Brentwood Baptist here, probably 10 minutes down the road. And my faith has been the most important thing to me my whole life. Early in my football career at BA, at Brentwood Academy, which is also here, I had a couple injuries, a couple setbacks that made me question whether or not I was supposed to be playing football. I was pretty undersized for a while and finally grew to where my senior year I was starting at quarterback at Brentwood Academy. In the very first game, I dislocated my ankle. Yeah, it wasn't pretty. Yeah, that thing was not what you want to see. But anyways, I didn't know what I was going to do. I just had to pray really hard. I had to wait to see what God had laid out for me. Ended up walking on to Ole Miss and just kind of fighting my way up the depth chart from there. I had to put on some weight, change to tight end. But, I mean, without God being there every step of the way, I don't think there's any chance I would be where I am today. So that's huge for me, my faith.
Speaking of transitioning from QB to tight end, what was that like? Did you have to mentally adjust your mindset?
Oh, yeah, that's a huge adjustment. I mean, playing quarterback, they're the prima donnas, they don't like getting hit. In high school, it was super fun playing quarterback, but it's also the hardest position on the field, I think mentally, just what they have to see, what they have to kind of diagnose when they see the safeties rotating, just so many things they have to deal with. But when you transition to tight end, you got to have a mindset of, okay, I need to go block a 290-pound D end, but also I need to go run routes on little safeties that are covering, receivers. So playing tight end's really fun too because just the versatility is pretty crazy. Whether it's blocking Robert Kimdichie when I got to Ole Miss, which was a nightmare for me, but then as I started putting on some more weight, started getting a little stronger in the weight room with the strength staff at Ole Miss, it started becoming a little easier to be able to do some of those things, and I started finally growing. I think I was 210 pounds when I got to Ole Miss, which is not a good weight for a Ole Miss or for an SEC tight end, but thankfully I was able to put on some weight and get to where I could compete at the tight end position. But that mentality is very different going from quarterback to tight end.
You mentioned walking on to the football team at Ole Miss. What was that like, trying to join an already established brotherhood?
I didn't have many offers. I had some very small offers coming out of high school, but I wanted to test my abilities at the highest level. I took a visit to Ole Miss, fell in love with it. The coaches were awesome. I loved the guys in the locker room. The campus was beautiful, just a great tradition of winning football there. So I got there, obviously didn't have a scholarship, kind of felt like I was not an outsider, but didn't feel like I was, one of the guys that was supposed to be there. But that was honestly the best thing for me because I felt like I had to work twice as hard just to get to where everyone else was. I kind of had to make a name for myself by being the hardest worker, by being there early to practice, being the last one to leave, early to the weight room, getting in extra lifts whenever I can, eating the right meals and getting the right protein shakes, just trying to put on the right amount of weight. But it was frustrating at first, but as I started to get to know some of the guys, like those friendships just came naturally there was no barrier between a guy with a scholarship versus a walk-on guy. Like some of my best friends are other walk-ons, while I've got other best friends from Ole Miss that were 5-star recruits. So they did a great job at Ole Miss, kind of making a culture of a family despite, how many stars you had coming out of high school.
In doing my research, I found out that the Bills drafted you 96th overall in the 2019 draft, which ironically enough for you was here in Nashville.
Oh, yeah.
What was it like to be sitting at home listening to your name being called?
It was one of the weirdest days ever for me. It was the second night of the draft. I had all my closest friends there. My whole family basically was there, which is awesome being in Nashville because everyone lives here. Like all 4 grandparents, uncles, aunts, cousins, almost everybody. I got a couple cousins down in Florida, 1 or 2 in Memphis, but most everybody was there in Nashville. And my mom had this huge elaborate setup. You know, she goes all out. We had the projector screen. All the couches were pulled together in a big circle. We had the greatest food. Since it was late in the 3rd round, the whole 2nd round had gone by, and basically the whole 3rd round had gone by, and we had been sitting there for about 4 hours. So everybody was starting to get a little tired. You know, we were just crossing our fingers, hoping that I would get drafted that night instead of having to wait for the next day. Finally got the call. It was from a New York number, which was crazy because the Bills didn't have a pick left in that round, and we hadn't seen the trade come through where they had traded up for the pick. So my agent the whole time was telling me that New England might take me with the last pick of the 3rd round. So I was thinking, okay, maybe this New York number is a scout for New England that has a New York number or something. So I answered the phone call, and for the first couple of minutes, I had no idea who was drafting me because the first thing they said were like, Dawson, congratulations on, you know, completing your dream of making it to the NFL. And I was like, yeah, sweet. Which team is it? And finally, they're like, okay, we're going to hand you to coach. It's like, coach who? And so the Coach McDermott gets on there and he's like, okay, congratulations, you're a Buffalo Bill. So I had to like whisper to the family, it's the Bills. Everyone's going nuts, but kind of trying to stay quiet.
Until it was ESPN official,
right?
Probably.
And so that was probably 10 minutes before the pick comes through. So ended the phone call. Everyone's obviously super excited. We go sit down on the couch, wait for a couple more picks, and finally get the pick to see myself get drafted to the Bills, which was super cool. And it was crazy because, I mean, that was happening on Broadway. And like you said, we were 20 minutes down the road in Brentwood. We actually ended up going downtown to Nashville, me and my friends, that night, which was really fun also.
I'm curious, what was the draft experience like with it being in Nashville? Did you actually ever get to go down to Broadway and experience it?
Oh, yeah. So right after that pick happened, celebrated with the family, took a bunch of pictures. We had a Bills hat somewhere, put that on. Had to do a few like over-the-phone interviews with the Bills media people. But we had a little party bus rented that took me and my closest friends downtown to Broadway. And the craziest part of the whole night is we got out of the bus on Broadway with, I think the numbers were like 500,000 people from out of town were in town for the draft. So it was just packed. And the very first people we see
Probably part of the mafia.
Yeah, was the woman who announced my pick on the stage. Yeah, what are the odds of that? So her name is Miss Carroll. She was like the guest picker for my pick from the Bills. She was wearing her shirt. It was her and her husband on the corner, very first people we saw. So obviously my friends go nuts. They start chanting like, Miss Carroll, Miss Carroll. We go over, she takes out the draft card, has me sign it. And then we talked to them for a minute, and now she's like best friends with my grandmother. So, yeah, that was a pretty cool experience. But we bounced around to a couple of different places on Broadway. Ended up going home late, but it was really cool to see the environment out there. I just remember seeing there were a bunch of news stories about bachelorette parties that were just super mad that that they had this trip
that
planned.
They were outshined by the draft.
Right, yeah. So they had no idea the draft was going to be here, and then of course they had this trip planned for a while. They get to Nashville and they're like, "It's our worst nightmare." But it was super fun to have that time with some of my closest friends.
I gotta ask this: what's up with the Afro? How do you keep it up?
Man, I just shower and that's about it. I don't put anything in there. I just kind of let it go. It's got a mind of its own. Maybe get an Old Spice, something down the road. I don't know. But so it was early in high school. I had like straight hair. super weird. Yeah, and then towards the end of high school, started getting curly, and now it's just the way it is. Don't really know what to do about it, but probably shave it off one of these days. Who knows?
How do you deal with playing against the Titans? Is it a mental? I know football's a mental game, but the Titans game has to be an awkward one for you.
Well, yeah, so I grew up a Titans fan. They were the hometown team. I loved Steve McNair, Eddie George, all those guys growing up. But now it's like, I'm 100% in for the Bills, and it's really fun to play in Nissan Stadium, where I grew up going to so many games, watching players play on that field as I was, a 5-year-old kid all the way through high school. But it is definitely one I'll always have marked on my calendar, because, it's just that special feeling of playing at home in front of, more friends and family that can make it to that game than other games, especially in Buffalo with it being so far away. But we play there on a Monday night this year, which I'm super excited for. Can't wait for that one. So I think it's going to be another really fun one. You guys got the best of us last year.
Yeah.
So we might need some
Thank
revenge
you, Derek.
this year. We might need some revenge this year. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. Right now, I think I'm 1-1 against the Titans, so we got to break that tie.
Did you ever play any other sports besides football growing up?
Oh, yeah. So my favorite sport when I was really young was soccer. I played soccer all the way through middle school. Kind of got burnt out as I was going into high school, wanted to focus on football and basketball. But when I was young, there were days that I would go from football practice to my travel basketball practice to my travel soccer practice all on the same night. That was back when I was in good shape. I wouldn't be able to do it now, but ran track all the way through high school. I never played baseball though. I don't know why. I just never got into it. I've always heard that's a really fun sport to play, but I just now picked up golf. I know I was talking to you about that. It's been a fun hobby for me, but yeah, I would say soccer was probably my favorite sport growing up, surprisingly. And then it kind of became football as I got into middle school.
Or at least American football.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, American football.
What was it like to play in the middle of the COVID pandemic?
Oh, gosh, that was tough. We could go to the facility and then back home. Couldn't go out to eat. Couldn't see any teammates outside the facility. Couldn't even grab lunch on an off day with somebody. It was tough just because I'm a social person. I like going out and doing stuff, whether it's just dinner or going to hit the golf course or something. So not being able to do anything like that outside the facility was hard. But we kind of got used to it. It was, the best part of the day was getting to the facility and seeing other people. So I think it did bring our team a little closer together too, which was cool to see that kind of camaraderie all come together because everybody was in the same boat of not being able to, do much else outside the facility. But I got COVID right in the middle of the season, which was super frustrating. It was right after the Titans game. I had like a headache the next day, but that was about it. And then I had to quarantine for 10 days. So I feel 100% healthy. And I'm having to sit in my apartment doing nothing for the last 9 days, trying to stay in shape as much as I can. They delivered some workout gear for me, but it was super weird. But I'm actually vaccinated now, so hopefully I don't get it again, knock on wood. But yeah, it was just, I would not want to go through that experience again.
You stated in an article that WKRN, the Nashville ABC affiliate, did, and I'm going to try to get this quote right. I was the kid that got to sweep the sweat off the floor during the breaks. In this quote, you were talking about wiping the sweat off what is now the Rickberg Court at Belmont University. Is that what fueled your sports dream?
So my dad played at Belmont, and obviously my cousin Tate plays there still.
Shout out my boy Tate, no free shout outs.
No free shout outs. But yeah, so I was probably, 7, 8 years old. And that was like one of my favorite things was going with my dad to those games and seeing those guys play. And there were a few games where I was able to be one of the guys with the little mop or whatever. So anytime there was a break, I'd go out and sweep the court, thinking it was like the coolest thing ever. Got the free T-shirt. I'm sure I still got that somewhere. I think my mom made it into a T-shirt blanket or something. Who knows? But yeah, I vividly remember those days going with my dad, and I still love going to see Tate play. I even got to see a couple games this last season, even though it was during COVID. Thankfully, we were able to get in there for a couple of them, but I'm really excited for Tate's last season here.
Speaking of cousins that play sports, does sports run deep in your family?
Yeah, I think so. Me and Tate and my brother Luke were talking about it the other day. Our grandfather played baseball and basketball at Vanderbilt. My dad was a basketball player at Belmont. My sister is going to Auburn to play soccer here in like 3 days. She just graduated from Brentwood Academy. My brother's at Ole Miss playing football. Obviously, we got Tate at Belmont. His older sister Haley played basketball in college too. My mom ran track at Tennessee and Samford, so she was crazy fast. I think her records at Brentwood Academy stood until like a couple years ago. But yeah, it's definitely a very competitive family. It's really fun to kind of compete any type of family reunion we had. Like some backyard football would get heated back in the days. Now we try to limit it to like an egg toss, but
Probably to save your arms.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, we don't need any off the field injuries, but we're going to the beach, that whole side of the family coming up in a few days. So we usually play some sand volleyball, some spike ball, anything like that. So it's always a good competitive time when our family gets together.
Dude, it's been so great talking to you. I do have one last question though. Where can people find you on the internet?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram and Twitter. I think those are really the only two places I'm on the internet. I don't do TikTok. I've been locked out of my Facebook for like 5 years. So Instagram or Twitter would probably be the best too.
So, speaking of socials, you can actually follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Rowdy Riley SR.
Let's go. I'll be following you. I know I don't have Facebook, but count me in on the other two.
Dawson, thanks again for coming on.
Absolutely.
It's been a blast.
That was awesome. Thanks, Riley.
This was Rowdy Riley's Sports Review with Dawson Knox.